Welcome to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. This episode we're going to be talking about feeding Sub-Sahara Africa. And with me I have a couple of guests who have been to Africa and know a lot about food systems in Africa and the world. I have Ollie Fisher and I have Perdita Fisher. And I want both of you to tell me a little bit about the website that you have and what that website promotes.
Well, thank you for having us today, Don. Our nonprofit that we started just this past year, Gone Eaton Agriculture and Ecology Enterprise, is centered around the small farmer and trying to bring organic foods and vegetables to local communities that cannot afford them or where they're food deserts. And also to encourage young people to look at farming and agriculture as a profession, because we have so many young people that are leaving agriculture. And I was in Belize just a few weeks ago, and I understand that there are over 200 different professions related to agriculture alone. So it's not just tilling the ground,
right.
But there's a lot of research involved, there's engineering involved, and equipment as well. So,
okay, let's move on to Africa. I understand that both of you have been to Ghana. Perdita, could you tell me a little bit about what you saw in Ghana?
Ghana is a beautiful country. It was much larger than I anticipated, even just visiting the city of Accra. But one thing that I noticed that there were many women and children on the streets selling commodities just to make a living. And one heartwarming story is I met a young lady who, had started to cry because she had dropped out of school because she had to work to help feed her family. And what I learned from her was that many of the products that they are selling are not their own products. They go to a place where they're given products to sell, and of course they do not get 100% of the profits. So they're working day and night, on the streets to sell items to, just so that they can feed their families, and they don't keep 100% of the profit.
So it's not like growing food and selling it where you get it.
I didn't see as much farmland where actually people were growing food, rather that they were doing other things to work to be able to purchase food.
Right. Ollie, can you add anything about Ghana?
Yeah, and the one disturbing thing is that most of the food that's grown is for export. And then the local people have to purchase their normal food substances like rice and so forth that they used to provide for themselves. So now it's created a dependency, and it's also created tremendous poverty because they're asked to grow these monocultures. So instead of growing diverse crops that could feed their entire families, now they're growing thousands of acres of peppers or tea leaves or whatever it might be.
So they're dependent on the international market.
They're dependent on the market.
And they don't control the market. The banks control the market.
Absolutely. And the same banks that put them in debt for their seed and everything else. And so when they don't get the prices that they were told that they were going to get from these markets, then they can afford to buy their staples. Because they're no longer growing. They were convinced that they were going to get these cash crops, and so they no longer grow the normal staples that really kept them going.
Now Ghana is in that part of Africa that's West Africa, and it looks like Brazil would fit right into it when there was all. Where is Senegal?
Senegal's a little further north now.
Okay, it's still on West Africa, but it's northern.
That's correct.
And I forget, which one of you went to Senegal?
I went to Senegal.
Tell us a little bit about Senegal.
It's been several years ago, but many of the same things were noticed there. But I did notice that there were many more produce stands along the way, but I was not sure whether or not they were actually growing the food and selling them, or whether someone was giving the food to them. But I did notice that the food quality was not as high as if they were actually going to the field, growing their crops and being able to eat them, because, again, the subsidies, someone else comes in and tells them, what to grow and what to sell. So then when they have to buy the food quality is less. One other thing I noticed in Senegal, though, that was very interesting was that I saw many people exercising along the water in the sand, which is a little bit harder to move through the sand, but they were at least conscious of trying to stay physically fit and mentally fit.
Right, and so that's, and of course, in Africa, I doubt that as many people have cars, and so people have to walk a lot.
Yes, you see a lot of people walking or maybe riding a bicycle.
Okay, so there is a lot of bicycle riding. Okay, yeah. Okay. Now, Ali, so you went to Kenya.
Correct.
What did you see there?
Well, a lot of similar things. Kenya is known for a lot of its tea, tea leaves, and so you'll see hundreds and hundreds of acres of tea leaves. Again, unfortunately, people cannot make subsistence off of just tea leaves, and that market again is controlled by Wall Street. They set prices as a commodity. So you have the same problem. In addition, it's compounded with the climate change. You have a lot of the areas in northern Kenya now that are becoming desert. There's a lot of drought. Fresh potable water is very scarce. So it's not unusual to see some of the women walking 10, 15 miles one way with pots on their heads to try to search for water for that day. So the conditions have really have deteriorated since we've had the time of the incursions of colonialism and so forth.
Okay, so we're going to take a break and see a movie, portions of a movie called Greening the Revolution, and that portion we're going to see is just about Kenya, and you'll be able to see the tea leaves that Ali has been talking about. We'll be back in just a minute.
For Africans, at least all the billions of people who live on less than $1 a day, you can't tell me, or you can't go and tell them honestly that globalization has been good, has improved their standards of living. It hasn't. It's clearly impoverished them.
Hapa nimekuja leo kusikiza mkutano ya chama cha Kusto. Hapa kwetu watu wako na njaa kabisa. Shauri tulipanda majani chai shamba yote. Kwa hivyo bahari ya kulima hakuna, tunategemea hiyo chai tu. Kwa hivyo watu wana njaa kabisa.
Africa is impoverished, and it's impoverished by the economic system, which sucks all the mineral resources, the wealth out of the continent and transfers it to different parts of the world. And one of the worst things I think about economic globalization is it impoverishes many people in order to improve the living standards of very few.
Ile shida inatushida zaidi, inatusukuma sana ni kukosa pesa na kupatiwa pesa kama watu wanatupwa kama ile nyati, ile nugu ya msituni. Kwa hivi tukaona KTDA hatujui walitoka upande gani, hata hujui majani yake ni gani. Wanatupatia pesa pila wanapenda. Ilikuwa sisi watu wa authority, na wakati authority ilikuja kukaingia agency, mambo ikaharibikia hapo kutoka wa sasa. Na ukisema kuna pesa inaitwa asasi, sijui asasi hata kwa Kiingereza hata ni nini, asasi hatujui ni nini. Na tukiangalia kwa kitabu tunaona ni pesa nyingi imelala pale na hajulikani hiyo pesa ni nini.
Kuharibika sababu vile tunaendelea na wao ndio wanatunyonya zaidi. Kwa hivyo wametumaliza.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. We are talking about feeding Sub-Sahara Africa, and with me I have Ollie Fisher and Perdita Fisher, who have thought a lot about these issues and have been to Africa. Now, Perdita, during the break you were telling me fool
rule shoot.
What does that mean? I've never heard that before.
Well, I actually picked it up from the segment. It essentially means that they fool you into thinking that you're going to be able to grow your own food and to be able to have a substantial income from that. And then they rule you. They keep you locked into growing what they want you to grow, not enough food to feed your families. And if you don't agree with that, then they shoot you. And many farmers had been shot because they didn't agree with. They wanted to be able to do what they used to do, is grow food that could feed their families, not just grow tea leaves.
Right, and so tea has always been a product in Kenya, but not where it's the only product that you do. And so grow. And so now that's people are pretty much tied to the market.
They're tied to it.
Okay. What are some of the problems that you see globally? You know, either with Kenya or with other countries about the whole way that food is grown.
Well, by making it a global market and by having it food being centralized now into fewer and fewer companies controlling the seed and the market, you really, and also industries being so greedy, instead of thinking about the people, they put profit over the people and cash over communities, and their greed over the good of the individuals. Now you just see the exploitation, and it's another form of slavery, but now it's over food. Which is, it has to have that in order to sustain life. They control the water, they control the food, and the other problem that we have now with the unfettered greed is the lack of control for the environment or concern for the environment. So when you poison the air, it poisons you back. You get emphysema, you get sick, and et cetera.
Well, let me ask you this. When you have an international market like this, they say, okay, Kenya, you're going to grow just tea. Okay, another area, you're going to grow just coffee beans. Another area, you're going to grow just cocoa beans for chocolate. What does it do to the soil to grow the same thing year after year after year?
That's an excellent question. It depletes the soil because you're not rotating your crops. And most farmers know that, and they know that you also should lay, the ground should be fallow every 7 years or so, just so it can nourish itself and replenish itself. And then when you dam up the rivers, so you don't get, the floodplains are there for a reason. And when you dam up the rivers, you no longer have the floodplains to allow the silt to go back into the farmlands.
The silt is the dirt that comes down from the water.
That's correct. And it re-nourishes and applies the minerals back into the soil. And the Nile Valley is an excellent case in point. It used to have some of the best wheat in the world.
I think anybody who's read the Bible can figure that one out.
Absolutely. And so by going in and changing these natural balances of nature, we have really done a very, very horrible thing to the planet, to the inhabitants, and even to our food now. So, and it's all for these international industries to profit.
Well, Perdita, do you think that humans know better than nature and can rule nature in terms of producing food?
I think, like they say, the proof is in the results, and I would say no.
Okay.
We learn from nature, but sometimes we think that we are rulers over nature, and we don't live in accordance with our environment.
What sort of agriculture would you like to see in Africa, in the world?
I would like to see, going back to the days of when I grew up in the South, of sharing seeds. Your neighbor may grow one thing and you grow something else, and you share those seeds back and forth, and then taking control, and not relying so much on the government promises, because we can see what has happened to those promises. They haven't made good on them, and so being able to take control so that you can feed your families and that you can feel whole and as a society and then as a world. We start, one farm at a time.
Well, there is some efficiency there in growing a lot of one thing. Would a reasonable system to be to have portion of the farmland dedicated to tea and, if that's your area, and then a larger portion donated to local food crops and to rotate that?
I think that it would be, we've seen how the large monocultures have decimated the small farmers and the people. And if they can go back to having diverse crops, even if they don't sell their crops or they don't get the amount of money for their crops as they think they should, they can at least feed their families.
Right.
And we don't see the children with the swollen bellies. We don't see the people waiting for the planes to come and bring in food, and just a total dependence that just makes them more and more dependent. So I would like to see the people that are like the Angelina Jolies and the Brad Pitts, instead of just shipping bags of wheat, if they can help the farmers go back to farming and feeding themselves again, that would be really the solution to the problem. Let's return to the past, the ways that worked for centuries.
Yeah, and years ago we had somebody from Zambia come and talk to us about it, because the food there, because they didn't want GMO crops, and they said when there was hunger, instead of feeding GMO crops, what the U.S. could do a lot more would be to give money to build roads, because they had a surplus of food in one part of the country where they had a deficit of food.
Those are the kind of things,
and the infrastructure, the hospitals, the roads, the trucks to transport food might really be helpful. Okay, let's take a break. We're going to see a little bit about Zambia now, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Lima, 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 ujese bana. Lima, 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 ujese banja. Lima, 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 ujese Zambia. Wa salama yo.
We did discover that in the process of talking about women's rights, we could not move unless and until we started ensuring that we were empowering women. And we do so through our food security program. They are free, therefore, when they're economically empowered, to walk out and feel able to support themselves. They are able to stand on their own without depending on their men.
We wanted to identify ourselves as women, that women can work as hard, even more harder than men, to grow food, and food not only the nation, women feed the world.
We provide maize seed, cassava cuttings, because they are drought resistant and that it doesn't need fertilizers, chemical treatment.
My main job is to mobilize the women and sensitize them on what women in agriculture is all about. We go out to the rural areas and calling the women for a meeting. And then we explain to the women what we're all about and tell them that we're there to help them feed themselves, to sustain themselves and their families, so that they don't have the dependency syndrome on their husbands. We try to empower the women.
In Zambia Alliance of Women, we talk about gender, and we do a lot of training at community level. In gender, we talk about partnership, real partnership between men and women.
Yes, the meetings are helpful because when we meet, we take one for farming, then agroforest, also HIV/AIDS. Yes, we are all practicing organic farming.
To some extent, it's difficult, it's not easy to be a farmer, a single parent as I am, since my husband passed away in 2001. So I was left with 6 children. So I had to struggle do my farming properly so that I could raise some income for the children, school fees and uniforms and so on. So where now I was taught how to maintain the land or soil fertility and how to make compost, how I can maintain my farm to the standard where it would give me a proper yield. The entire farm is declared organic. When you are adequately trained as a farmer, then you are able to survive.
Today we are also faced with the issues of GMO. You're talking about chemically or genetically modified organisms. If we depend on GMOs, we do not know what long-term impact it has.
My forefathers, I've never heard of this GMO. Why should America come now to say GMO is going to finish hunger in Africa? For instance, a situation where a tomato is, injected with another gene from a fish. How can a tomato definitely behave like fish? We don't understand that. But for one person, the Monsanto director, to come and derail our life, our well-being of, we don't want. We don't want. We don't want. Yes, and in fact, Zambia has said no to GMO. Eventually, we want to make the point that GMO has no base in Africa. No to DuPont USA, no to Monsanto USA, no to Switzerland, Syngenta, whatever. No! They should not control this world. We need to uphold the integrity of our seed. To hell with Monsanto.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz, and with me I have a couple of folks who know a lot about the issue of Africa and food in Africa. I have Perdita Fisher and Ollie Fisher, who have both visited African countries. I wanted to ask you, what would you like to leave the viewer with, Perdita? What do you think are some of the real important points about food?
Well, one thing I noticed about the film on Zambia is that they would grow drought-resistant. They would plant drought-resistant seeds, which helped them, in areas of time when there was not enough rainfall, and they said no to GMOs.
Yeah,
no,
very emphatically.
They uphold the integrity of the seed, and I think if we all look at that by buying local, organic, fresh food from local farmers, that's one thing that we can do to uphold the integrity of the seed.
Right, and I thought that was very interesting because so many times the news will portray the opposition to genetically modified organisms as only, white intellectuals, but it's clear that people all across the world.
Right.
Okay, Ollie, what would you like to leave the viewer with?
I would like to have them to educate themselves, and instead of trusting the propaganda that they hear, even if they think that something that we say is not correct, to verify it.
Right.
Research it, find what the truth is. And if you just look at what's happened in the world with the food supply and the starvation and the poverty of billions of people, including here in the U.S., you can see that what we're doing is not working. And anyone can see that we need to change. I would ask them to buy organic and support the local farmers for their own health and the health of their...
Ollie Fisher, Perdita Fisher, I'm getting the wrap-up sign. I want to thank both of you for participating in the discussion. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in to Green Time this week. Please tune in to Green Time same time next week.